Today, we are talking about the top 7 rare champions that you should be taking the 6-star to level 60 inside Raid Shadow Legends in 2024. So, a few considerations for this. Of course, I am a late game player, so the champions that I'm recommending are champions that are going to have versatility even on my account to this day. So these are champions that I end up using myself, with the exception of one on the list, but I'll mention a little bit more why we have him on there. And then, of course, these are going to be champions that I think are going to progress very well with your account. So they're not going to be very niche champions that are really only usable in one dungeon or those sorts of crazy things. Let's go ahead and hop straight into the list with a pick that will probably surprise nobody, and that is going to be Apothecary. Apothecary is an absolutely fantastic champion with his 106 base speed. He has an increased speed as well as a turn meter fill on his A3. He has a single target heal that can be critical. This is an absolute chunky heal if you build him right. And then he has a triple hit on the A1. This guy is absolutely fantastic and still very much worthy of taking to 6 stars in 2024. I find myself using him all the time for certain tournaments as they come up, City of Centranos content, all those sorts of good things. And of course, as you can see from his reviews, everybody is quite high on him as well. The second champion is actually going to be from the High Elves as well, and that is Fencer. Now, Fencer is a champion that might surprise some people on this list, and I will spoil things a little bit by saying that you're not going to find a War Maiden on this list because I am doing things a little bit differently, and I am actually of the opinion that Fencer is a better champion than War Maiden. I've made an entire video showcasing her and talking about why. But the long and short of it is we still have an AoE defense break. They're both Force Affinity champions, so there's not really an affinity difference. This is the weak version, but we do have blessings that can have a chance of placing the strong version now. But she also brings a lot more utility in her kit than somebody like a War Maiden does. So on her A2, she has a 100% chance of a stun, and she's going to steal 20% of the turn meter if the stun is not placed. So if you think about like Fire Knight or any sort of boss content where you can steal that turn meter, right? Like so Dark Fae, for example, she's going to be a lot more useful than somebody like a War Maiden. And then of course, on the A1, she has a chance of a decreased speed. So again, think Fire Knight, and she's going to be absolutely fantastic. Next champion on the list is actually going to be from the Ogryn tribes. This guy I did another review on recently as well. It's going to be Belor. He has 3 skills, all of them are AoE. He has an AoE block active skills, AoE decrease speed, and an AoE decrease attack and decrease defense. Now, same thing is going to apply with this guy as with Fencer. He has the small version of the debuffs, but you can easily use blessings to go ahead and place the big version. That is kind of the point that we're at in Raid. We are blessed to have those blessings, no pun intended. So he can definitely benefit from that a lot. And again, I'm still finding myself using this guy a lot in content, especially City of Centranos, especially some of the Doom Tower secret waves. And if you need to progress through, secret rooms, or if you need to progress through faction wars, those sorts of things, this guy is going to be absolutely fantastic. He can also work as a campaign farmer for you as well if you build him either fast enough or with enough damage. Next champion, speaking of campaign farmers, is going to be Felhound. Now, Felhound is essentially one of the best campaign farmers in the game because you can build him out with enough damage dealing stats that his A1 will essentially one-shot every single mob on stage 12-3 or 12-6 as long as you have him built correctly. And he does, of course, have the AoE on the A1, so he's going to prioritize that. He has decreased speed there. Defense and attack damage scaling, this guy is very unique. He also has a lot of usage outside of campaign, though. So if we look at his A3, he has a block damage to help keep somebody alive, but more importantly, he does also have a small continuous heal as well as a reflect damage on everybody for 2 turns on a 2-turn cooldown. So for those of you that are good at math, that is going to be 100% uptime. Really, the only downside to this guy is his base stats, so terrible HP at 14,000, terrible defense at 1,100 almost, and then 92 base speed is pretty crazy. That's very, very low. But this guy definitely has some use cases. Again, there's going to be stages in City of Centranos where you can use him, and you could even get away using him in something like Tag Team Arena. I know on my free-to-play account, I actually have him set up to be in my Tag Team Arena account. The account is fairly new, right? So you could use him in an area like that. You're going to be building him for damage anyways. And very early on, at least, especially if you're trying to get to like your Drexstar fragments and those sorts of things, you're going to need those champions that can actually do damage. Otherwise, you're just going to get like out-healed by somebody in an Immortal set, like a UDK or something like that, right? So he has a lot of utility. I still use him all the time on my late game or very early end game account, so I think that kind of speaks for itself. We're on to the next champion. The next champion here is actually going to be from the Knight Revenant faction, and it is going to be Renegade. So you could make the argument that Renegade would be perfectly fine at 4 or 5 stars, but I do think that in today's meta, she does benefit from going to the full 6 stars. Why is that? Well, she has a reset, or rather a decreased cooldown of all ally skills by 2 turns on a 5-turn cooldown, so essentially she can help your team cycle a lot more. You're going to see her in something like a Karma Burn setup with a Seer, but you can also get a lot of use out of her inside the Hydra, for example. So before I got my Crixia, I was relying on Renegade to be my essentially Hydra reset champion to enable my Trunda teams, for example. Now with the Hydra rework out, we're going to need a lot more, champions like this for different teams, right? Since we're probably going to be focusing on all 3 keys, all 3 teams, as opposed to just throwing our best champions into 1 key. So having a champion like this on standby can certainly be helpful, because there's going to be a lot of players out there that don't have, Prince Kaimar, or don't have, the Crixias or Yumikos or those sorts of champions. So she can be very, very useful. And then just having the additional tankiness and the additional, accuracy and resistance possibilities with her when you have her built out at 6 stars is going to be absolutely fantastic. You can put the banners on her and all those sorts of good things. We're now on to our last 2 champions, which are actually going to be from the same faction. The first one is a champion that we've talked about here on the channel before. I am a huge fan of this guy. It is Tree Shield Knot. Now, he does have definitely very, very good reviews, so I think people are starting to catch on that he's a very decent champion. He has a 2 ally revive with 25% HP and turn meter on a 5-turn cooldown, and he also places a shield on all revived allies for 2 turns, equal to 20% of their max HP. Now, he does also have a AoE heal of 15%, and he's also going to place a small version of an increased defense on all allies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So already his kit is looking pretty fantastic, but he does also have ally speed and faction crits by 15% aura, and he does have a triple hitter with a decreased attack on the A1, albeit the small version. But when you're looking at a kit that is just this good, there's not really a way that you can argue for this guy to be a bad champion, or there's not really a way that you can argue for this guy not to be 6 star. The only thing, again, as we see with some of these rares, is his base stats are a little bit lacking in some areas. So the 1100 defense is kind of low, 1000 defense is kind of low, and the 16,000 HP is definitely on the lower end of what we'd like to see for late game or certainly end game content. But that 101 base speed really helps to make up for it, especially on a rare champion. The last champion is still going to be from the Sylvan Watchers faction, of course, and it is actually Branch Arm Lasser. So Branch Arm is one of the only champions on this list. He is, in fact, the only champion that I have not built out or done a video on it, but his kit alone definitely makes him worth investing in. He has very solid base stats in terms of the HP. Defense is incredibly low, and speed is kind of lower than we'd like to see as well. What does he do? He has a triple hit on the A1, each hit healing him by 3% of their max HP, so it doesn't have to be criticals or anything like that. He is a damage dealer based on HP, by the way, so the more he can survive, the more damage he can do. A2 is going to attack everybody 2 times. Each hit has a 70% chance of placing a decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. And he's also going to place a shield on all allies equal to 20% of his max HP, which is very solid, by the way. So not only is he decreasing the enemy's attack, he's also placing a shield on your team, which is going to do a dual purpose. It's basically going to double your survivability, because they're going to do less damage because of the decreased attack, and you're not going to take any damage because of the shield, right? So all the damage that they do still manage to output is going to be just absorbed by the shield. And lastly, he places a Strengthen on everybody for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown, and he's also going to place a Provoke on an enemy for 1 turn. Now, since I said I have not built this guy out, the only thing I'm not sure of is if this Provoke is on a targeted enemy or if it's a random enemy, because that kind of just, makes or breaks this skill essentially, right? Because the Strengthen for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown is just, okay. It's nothing too crazy. But if this is a targeted Provoke, that would be very cool. This guy is still going to be very, very nice for something like a Magma Dragon, for example. Having the Provoke, right, and the decreased attack, as well as the shield, he's going to help out your survivability a ton, especially if you're stuck there. Very, very good champion for faction wars as well. And of course, just overall progression, this guy can certainly help out. And just keeping your team alive is always something that you need more of as you're trying to progress inside the game. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing a part 2 of this video, or if there's any champions that you think I missed. And if you do want to see the part 2, certainly let me know which champions you'd like to see on that list. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.